Good evening and welcome to Mets 360 here on Riverside. I'm your host, Brian Jura. And unless you've been living under a rock, you know that today was the trade deadline and there's lots of action involving the Mets. And this is a great time to talk about where things are. And I'm very happy to have a writer for the site, Taryn Cooper, join us. And Taryn, thanks so much for joining us here on this busy day in baseball.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brian. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you and talking Mets.
All right. Well, the Mets made two trades on Wednesday, and they made another trade today. They sent three minor leaguers to the Orioles for center fielder Cedric Mullins. So tell me, are you a fan of the Mullins edition?
I am a big fan of the Mullins edition, let me tell you. I would say out of everybody that was rumored to be on the trade block from like any team, Cedric Mullins was the guy I really zeroed in on, and I thought he would have been a great addition for the Mets, and here we are. In fact, I had MLB Network on, and my husband actually got the notification about the trade before they announced it on MLBN, and I was like, what? Like I went crazy. Just to kind of give you an idea, I wrote something I believe it was last month on Mets 360 about Tyrone Taylor and about how I actually really liked his defense and I liked his style of play. And what we all agreed upon was that his bat was a little lacking. Well, Cedric Mullins is that and more with the bat. He is a lifetime 280 hitter with an 803 OPS against NL teams. And even though there's a very small sample set from his time at Citi Field, he is an over 400 lifetime hitter at Citi Field. My goodness, we hit the jackpot with this guy. So we kind of have the best of both worlds. We can have Tyrone Taylor as a defensive replacement, which I think we all agree that's probably what his role is suited for. And I was really high on Cedric Mullins. I thought he would be a great addition. He's a rental. That's okay. I'm really excited about him joining the team. How about you?
When the news came down that they got Mullins, and of course they were linked to pretty much every center fielder on the market, so it wasn't a surprise that they got one. I guess my hope was that that was paving the way for another step, and that step being acquiring a top of the rotation starting pitcher. I'm not thrilled. I don't hate the move for Mullins, in a vacuum. But to me, since the team still has Brett Beatty and it still has Ronnie Mauricio and it still has Mark Vientos, I want to see all of those three guys play. And the addition of Mullins makes that harder to accomplish. So it'll be real curious to see how Carlos Mendoza makes up the lineup most nights. You mentioned Tyrone Taylor and him being a great defensive player, and he absolutely needs to come in for Mullins in the late innings. Mullins has a noodle arm. If you thought that Brandon Nimmo's arm in center field wasn't good enough, I think you need to cover your eyes when Mullins makes a throw. So Mullins hasn't had the greatest offensive year here so far, but he's been hot lately. And yeah, it's only been I think 13 games, but 13 games given what Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso have been giving us over those last 13 games. It'd be nice to have somebody in the lineup who's hot.
Yeah, I agreed.
So let's talk about some of the other additions that the Mets made. They made three additions over the past week to address the shortcomings in the bullpen, and they gave up I don't know 8 players to get those three pitchers. I don't think that any of them by themselves was too much to give up. But what do you think? What do you think about the three bullpen moves the team made?
I mean, I think any bullpen move would be the right move because I we've had several discussions about it, and I feel like we might have some short term amnesia about how effective our bullpen was at the beginning of the season. But it was also kind of like this precursor to, okay, they're getting ridden into the ground. We had starters who weren't going very deep into games, but our bullpen was solid until it wasn't. All right. And I mean, I think if you say bullpen to any Mets fan, that will kind of trigger a lot of post traumatic Mets disorder because how many times has our bullpen failed us? It's been a lot. But I do feel like um with since our starters can't go deep into games, I mean, maybe Peterson is good for like 7 innings, but you still have to cover 2 innings there and several others. And the thing that has concerned me, especially on the road trip, was the fact that they really couldn't go to Diaz as much since he would have to come in with like these razor thin leads, and there really wasn't like a lot of wiggle room for him. But they seem to have done that with Helsley, who, by the way, does come into Hell's Bells like Trevor Hoffman did. So I'm actually really excited to hear his entrance music at City Field. I mean, I guess I'm kind of a dork like that, but there's that. I think we recently just saw Rogers in San Francisco, and he really held his own. He's got a rubber arm. He's a submariner. I think when you're talking about like the amount of prospects and players, the only I believe that the only like major league pitcher rather, that they got parted ways with was Jose Buto. I don't think that that's necessarily bad. I've said before that the way that the ownership is treating, the players somewhat like commodities, they're valuing stocks, they're shorting blue chips, and they're going long on futures. This is why you go long on futures, to make moves like this. And I feel that it does make the Mets a little more competitive, because it is true. Like they did need bullpen help and they got it.
All right, so this is a serious question. I know that they play walk-up music for all of the batters who
Mhm.
come to the plate, whether they hit like Juan Soto or they hit like Luis Angel Acuna. They all get their walk-up music.
Mm.
We know that Edwin Diaz comes in to Narco. So would they play music for the entrance for the seventh or eighth inning guy and the new Cardinals guy who you just said came into Hell's Bells?
Yeah, yeah, they do. I mean, it probably won't be like as light, the light display and just like it's very dynamic when Diaz comes into the game. And if you remember, you had Billy Wagner, you had Mariano Rivera, and I mentioned Trevor Hoffman. Probably one of my biggest regrets is not seeing Trevor Hoffman pitch at Petco coming into close, because like I thought everybody said that it was just like this experience that it really got the crowd riled up and everything. But yeah, they do come in. It's probably not as, they're probably not going to do like the light show like they do with Diaz, but you do get, the same effect for any, middle reliever.
So I have it on complete made up authority, but I hear that Ryan Stanek is a Rick Astley fan. So does that mean when he comes into the game, we can hear some magic sounds of Rick Astley?
Oh, you mean like Rick rolls?
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, maybe. I'd be a fan. Everybody knocks Rick Astley, but you all get up and dance when Never Gonna Give You Up comes out.
I knew the song, but I was completely blanking on it. So thank you for throwing it out there. Never gonna give you. Can you just see Ryan Stanek coming on both into that song? But anyway, I love, love, love the three moves that they made. I thought that the biggest need for the club was somebody who could lock down the eighth inning and also close on days when Diaz had pitched the two previous days, and I thought that they got that with Gregory Soto. And then they added two guys who fit that same bill as well. And I just love all of the options that Mendoza has now. And it's a really deep pen. So I feel really good about that. I still would have liked to have gotten a starter, once we got the eighth inning guy locked down. But, recent history has shown us that playoff games are won by bullpens.
Yeah.
We all have this image of a starter pitching 3 games in a 7-game series and pitching 22, 23 innings, but that's a 1960s 1970s reality, and the 21st century reality is you got to have that lockdown pen, and I feel like the Mets have it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That it needs to be MVP level, and that, yeah, you're absolutely right. Championships are won by bullpens. So there you go.
All right, well, let's move away from the trade deadline and then just talk about the Mets team as it's currently constructed. And I've talked a lot about Pete Alonso, and I want to know how confident you are that he'll be able to get out of his funk and be a productive hitter here down the stretch.
So I actually might have a kind of unpopular opinion about Pete Alonso right now. I think what you see with Pete Alonso right now is what we have always gotten. But I did some digging before. Now, I took a look at Pete Alonso's lifetime average, okay, just to see like where he lines up with a career wise and what he's doing this year. Career wise, he's a 250 hitter. Not bad, right? Um, and his line is 250, 341, 512. Okay. And we always kind of expect Pete to just hit bombs. He's going to break Daryl Strawberry's home run record with the Mets eventually. But I'm kind of like a little stunned. And I know that I've talked about it with my husband as well, because I said, oh, he's going to break it in June. He's on fire. He's definitely going to do it. And Ed would say, no, no, no. I think it's going to be after the All-Star break. And we were both wrong. It's, August 1st, and he's still, I think it's 5 away now. And this year, he's actually hitting above his career average. Not by much. And he's hitting 259 right now. And his line is 259, 351, 491. I think what we are kind of looking at right now with Alonso is the fact that he's not getting as many total bases as we're used to seeing, but he's actually kind of hitting above his normal class. Like, this is, I noticed like at some point, I don't remember which series, unfortunately, but he was like getting on base a lot with a lot of doubles. And I was like, and I think I even said like, oh, look, Pete Alonso doubles machine, ha ha. And I think that because he's lacking in the slugging department, that's why we might think he's kind of underperforming. It's actually not. I think it's the fact that he's in the crux of that 1, 2, 3, 4 that was supposed to be our lights out, can't go wrong, top heavy lineup. It's just that they're not performing the way that they should, right? So, at the beginning of the season, it seemed like Pete was able to hit bombs on command. Remember that? It was like, wow, like this guy, he's on fire. He's really proven us right. He bet on himself, right? So he's technically not underperforming. I don't think. I think what we're seeing now is probably what we're going to get with Pete Alonso. As far as getting out of his funk, I think this is it for him. I think this is like what we're going to see out of him. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but maybe he's kind of hitting in the wrong place in the lineup.
We don't know how much the hand injury is bothering him, and he's certainly he's in the weeds right now. I think it was 5 for 57 when I last checked, and then I think he had an 0 for 3 to go along with that. So he really hasn't been making much impact offensively. And when you say Pete Alonso, people have the memories of what he did as a rookie when he hit 53 home runs, or what he did in 2022, which was his last really, really good season. And he got off to such a great start this year, was doing everything that his supporters claimed he was going to do. He was hitting for average, he was hitting for power, he was walking, he wasn't striking out much. And then after the first month or so, it's like the light switch got turned off, and we're seeing all of these strikeouts, none of the walks, and not nearly enough power. And the Mets are such a good team if Pete Alonso is Pete Alonso, and he just hasn't been that for going on 3 months now, and I'm worried.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I didn't mean to be flippant about Alonso's overall performance because, like you said, I think in the context of how the team has been performing as well, it just makes it maybe more evident that there's an issue. But I think you could argue that about Soto, who, and I don't have his numbers in front of me right now, but I do know that Jose Reyes on Baseball Night in New York would talk about how he's not as aggressive at the plate, which you expect somebody like Soto, to be aggressive at the plate, but he's taking a lot of strike threes. He's looking, and That's, and Soto is walking more. Okay, great. Like he's getting on base more. That's a good thing. But Juan Soto was signed to slug. And, and then you've got, the other parts of the team that are just seem to not be clicking on all cylinders. Like they are a much different team. And like you said, the team's a lot better when Alonso's hitting. That's sure. That's for sure. But the rest of the team is underperforming as well, I think. So I think it just makes it that much more evident that, you know, he might the struggles or maybe like the fact that he might be hitting more for average but not I think that's kind of what we sort of expected from Pete Alonso, and we're not getting that right now.
So earlier I was referring to Alonso and Francisco Lindor as the struggle twins. So since we talked about Alonso, let's talk about Lindor. And he just does not, to me, he just does not look good at the plate. And to me, the problem is pitchers are just attacking him high, and he line from A League of Their Own, where the sisters, one of them was talking about the other one, like the high balls, can't lay
Mhm.
off them, can't hit them,
Yep.
and I feel like it's that way with Lindor. So, do you have any ideas on how to get Lindor to lay off the high pitches?
Oh, I mean, maybe he needs a psychologist or something. I mean, it is getting really frustrating because I feel like, when he made the All-Star team this year, and everybody was kind of like, how did he not make the All-Star team at all with the Mets in the past few years and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like he got kind of pushed in by his performance last year. Like, he had MVP numbers last year. He was amazing. That was why you get somebody like Francisco Lindor. But you're right. I'm kind of just baffled why he seems so lost at the plate. Contrast with Alonso, and I gave you his line this year where he's hitting slightly above his career average. But Lindor, he's way off. It's like 30 points under his lifetime average. And his OBP and slugging have taken a hit too. Like he's not getting the extra base hits. He's not getting the home runs. It's kind of insane. But again, I will circle back to the 1, 2, 3, 4 punch in the lineup. And when I say the 1, 2, 3, 4 punch, I mean there's not much punch there. Like that's a fact. It's like if you look at all of them, they're not none of those the top four are performing the way that they should be. I think it's, Lindor is more, in my opinion, the symptom and not the problem. But the problem, I don't know what it is. Is he just like seeing not as great pitches because they're I don't know. It's kind of baffling to me to see that because you would think he'd be seeing better pitches because he's, quote unquote protecting guys like Soto and Alonso. It's kind of insane to see.
Somehow we got to figure out a way to spike the punch.
Well, maybe he needs to offer Jobu some rum and a cigar.
There you
Maybe they
go.
need to get a bucket of fried chicken. I don't really know. What is happening there, and when they came back from the All-Star break, I mean this last road trip, the sweep in San Diego notwithstanding, they did split a West Coast road trip, which isn't horrible. You have to remember that this is a team sport. We just have a couple underperformers right now, and they're the stars of the team.
So I really like the idea of having the sacrifice. I say it, partly tongue in cheek, but I do think that there's something worthwhile to do in some of the silly little rituals, anything to help break the tension. And, who knows? Maybe you could actually work on top of that. But let's move along to a different hitter. And that's someone who I'm not a huge fan of, but no one can argue that he's been productive when getting playing time, and that's Starling Marte. And do you feel like right now, here, now that the trade deadline is coming past, how does Starling Marte fit into things? And do you think Carlos Mendoza should get him more playing time?
I mean, it really depends on if you mean he should get more time defensively or maybe as a DH because I happen to be a huge Starling Marte fan. I was crazy about him in 2022. I really feel like his injuries kind of trickled down to the rest of the team at the end of the season. They really could have benefited from like a guy who like he's speedy, he's got a quick bat. I really thought Marte added a certain panache to the 2022 team. It seems like when he's performing the rest of the like he seems like overall like just like a good clubhouse guy, and it seems like when he performs the rest of the team kind of follows suit. That said, I I think he's probably, if not the oldest, one of the oldest players on the team. And I hate saying that. I'm like, he's only like 36. I think he'll be 37 at the end of the season. But, it's like, but he's not a spring chicken in baseball years, is what I'm trying to say. I think Mendoza's probably meeting him where he's at, like as far as getting him enough playing time. But I do notice that when he is on, and it really does help the team. So yeah, I mean, it really depends on what constitutes more playing time. I absolutely think that he's a great DH and he's good on the defense too. I think he's a very solid player, but you know, we've got like we said, we've got like this packed outfield now. Where's he gonna play? I think that, Mendoza's probably meeting him where he's at right now.
So you used the word panache, which I really like, but I'm wondering what the opposite of that word is because I think we have the opposite of that word with Frankie Montas. Montas, he's a little reminiscent of Sid Fernandez in the bottom half of him. I look him on the mound and it's like, God, that's a big guy. But anyway, Montas, he got off. He started the year on the IL, and he's made 6 starts since coming back, and 3 of them have been solid, and 3 of them he's got lit up. So where do you stand with Mister Non Panache Montes?
Well, I think, you probably just answered your own question. He's an average pitcher, and I'm not even sure if average is fair. When you look at his career stats, he's just okay. Like I have like, how there's like Hall of Fame and then there's Hall of Very Good. Well, I have Hall of slightly better than okay with some players and pitchers. And Montas is kind of like meh. Like I know that at the beginning of the season, I'm not really sure how he kind of factored in, but to me, he's always just been a back of the rotation guy. So, like you say, like whatever the opposite of panache is, maybe it's meh. He's just a meh kind of pitcher. I think his struggles are sort of fresh for us because we're seeing like a very small sample size in this, in his time with the Mets since he just came back last month or whatever. He also melted, I don't even want to say melted down. He didn't have his best performance in a park where the Mets traditionally don't play well. The Mets have not won a series at Petco Park since it opened. They've lost several embarrassing games there, including one I was at, by the way. Everest Cabrera grand slam in the ninth inning. So, like to me, that's just sort of like, okay, maybe Montas has earned his stripes as a Met, kind of contributing to that legend of not playing well in Petco Park. So I think you answered your own question. I think he's just average, and that's what we're gonna get. And and even when I was looking at his stats, I was like, he doesn't even pitch a lot of innings. Like it's one thing if he had a rubber arm and can just give you some solid innings. He doesn't even do that. So I'm kind of like at a loss as to how he would fit in. But I guess, if he is a 500 pitcher, he's a 500 pitcher, and we just got to kind of take it as it comes.
So you can see a guy as an opponent, a couple of times over the course of however many years. And certainly I've seen Montas pitch before this year, but getting to see him pitch 6 times now, the fastball is better than I thought or that I remembered. And the split finger, which I knew he had, has been good. I think he's got 2 really good pitchers with the fastball and the split finger. but man, it seems like every other pitch he throws up there gets crushed. And I'm just wondering, and we never know as fans, who's responsible. Is the pitcher calling the pitches? Is the catcher calling the pitches? Is the bench calling the pitches? And and to a certain extent, it's all three. But whoever has the biggest say in that, throw more fastballs.
Mm.
The guy's got a solid 97-mile-an-hour fastball. Throw it. I want to see more fastballs, and I think if he threw more fastballs, he'd be more successful.
Well, we'll send this podcast to the to Jeremy Hefner. He'll take that to heart.
Get half on the case.
Yes.
All right, well, let's talk about a pitcher that we most likely have a better feel for and appreciation, and that's Sean Manaea. He's had fewer starts than Montas, and he's got a 2.08 ERA. So he's certainly delivering quality. The issue is he's not delivering quantity. He isn't going deep into games. So do you think he can add that quantity as he gets further removed from the IL?
I think so. I I see that Mania, and I am a big Sean Mania fan, by the way. I was so happy when he became a Met in 2024, and he really kind of, aligned himself with the Mets lore right away. He's awesome. I really enjoy watching him pitch. Um, and we have to remember that he is coming back from a significant injury, and he did have several setbacks in his rehabilitation. So whether this is by design, maybe being cognizant of his pitch counts, or maybe he's, doing like kind of like the Ron Darling thing where he would sort of finesse rather than just throwing the heat, and it could be one of those like, post traumatic things about not wanting to re injure yourself. That could be in his head as well. So I kind of keep those in mind, even though he has had some pretty solid outings so far. You can define quantity. Mania, when healthy, has never been like a 200 innings pitch guy. I know that's not going to happen this year since he did start late, but his max innings pitched in his career was actually last year with the Mets. Um, so again, I would just say, we can define quantity, but obviously, I think going down the stretch, going through, the pennant race and getting to the playoffs, I think we're probably going to see him earn more confidence. Whether it's working around the injury or being, kind of timid, not wanting to re-injure himself. I think that it might be a combination of all those things is what I'm seeing. But I absolutely think that he has the ability to go deeper into games once that maybe it's a mental hump at this point for Mania.
All right. Well, we have reached the crazy prediction time in the show. I'll give you what I feel is a crazy prediction and then ask you to comment on it. And then we'll flip roles where you throw me the crazy prediction. Okay. So you ready?
Yep, yep, let's go.
All right. In June and July, the Mets got just 5 starts where their starting pitcher went at least 7 innings. And my prediction is that in August and September, they'll get at least 12 starts of 7 innings. So tell me, is that crazy?
No. I mean, I say no because I can absolutely see it happening. I could, with, some of, we were just talking about Montas and Mania, for example, and we know Peterson can also go deep into games. So I can see it, we'll see how August pans out, but
All
and I
right,
think,
so I whiffed on my crazy prediction. So show me how it's done. What's
all
yours?
right, I think I probably will too, but I mean, it might be a bold coup prediction. So my bold coup prediction is that the Mets are going to win the division. I think they're going to win the NL East. I think that the reason it seems so competitive is that the Phillies actually aren't doing better. They're not doing well. And they had a spotty bullpen. And they just got Duran, which is supposed to improve, but that was really it. And I think, down the stretch, we're going to see the Mets really win some close games with the Phillies and, maybe finally, I don't know why they didn't beat up on the Braves with how bad they're doing this year. But I think I said that they would win the division. but I didn't say how far they would go into the playoffs. And I think that's when you might start to see the cracks in the facade. But I think they're going to win the division, and I think they're going to win it by a lot.
So we're in the dog days of summer, and it gets hot, and a lot of times there's no breeze. So I think everyone listening to this will be very grateful that we provided two massive swings and misses and created a breeze to cool things down here in the summer. So certainly, to me, it's a big stretch to imagine the Mets or the Phillies, for that matter, to win the division. Now, if you said the Mets are going to win the division by 10 games, yeah, then you would have gotten the crazy mantle. But just winning the division, I'm sorry, not enough for me.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. Well, I guess that leads well into our next question. The Mets right now are 62 and 47, and now that they have the team that they're going to go to battle with for the rest of the season, what's your prediction for their final record?
Well, I actually, at one point, in this season, I remember it looked like the Mets were seriously unbeatable at some points. Um, I thought that they were like a 99 win team. I was like, oh my God, they're totally going to run away with everything. But they're 62 and 47, and that means there's 53 games left in the season. And I think that, you know, going 30 and 23 in those final games seems somewhat reasonable. They could win 92 games and still win the division, I think. That was kind of where it tied into my bold coup prediction. That I think that they will eke it out that way. But I think that that would be enough to win the division, is if they won 92 games.
So I think that's a very reasonable projection going forward. They had so much trouble in June when both Brazaban and Garrett were stinking things up in the bullpen. So hopefully they've gotten their bad stretches out of the way, and then with the bullpen additions, I think the pitching's going to be okay. And it all depends on if those punch guys at the top of the order start punching. Hopefully they can punch at their weight, if not above it. And, if you tell me that those top four guys are going to hit, I don't think a projection, 5 games higher of what you said would be unrealistic. I mean, I think that the players are on this team if they play to the back of their baseball cards. Can they do that? Will they do that? Well, that's why we play them. We'll get to find out. But it would not surprise me at all if the Mets were a 97 win team.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, we got time for one more question. We started off talking about the trade deadline. So, a nice bit of symmetry. Let's finish it talking about the trade deadline. And I want to know if there's a move that you had hoped that the Mets were going to make before the deadline that they didn't, and what would that have move have been?
I actually was pretty pleased overall with how they performed. I said that at the beginning of the show, and I'll say it, kind of rounding it out at the symmetrical way. We needed bullpen arms. We got it. I don't really have many complaints about those moves. I know that I had talked about Bednar. I thought he might have been a good fit. But that's it. The Minnesota Twins pretty much parted ways with like everybody on their team. I was talking about it with a Yankee fan. He's like, "Give us Joe Ryan," and I was like, "Sure, why not?" But I can't really say that. I think like you, I would have liked another reliable starter, but I think going down the stretch, we're going to be okay. And they were very active at the deadline. I can't really complain about it.
I was single-handedly trying to start the rumor that O'Neill Cruz was on the trading block, but no reliable source actually said that. So that was probably a pipe dream at best. But clearly, once they got Mullins, they weren't going to add another center fielder to the list. And I was also hoping against hope that they were going to, be really bold and pull the trigger on a Sandy Alcantara deal. And I know full well what Alcantara's numbers have been here in the beginning as he works his way back from TJ surgery. But he's been 12 shutout innings in his last two games. So maybe he's turning the corner, and maybe this was the one time in the next 5 or 6 years you could have gotten him, at a reduced rate. So I wish they would have tried to have done that, especially once they got center field. But you can't have everything. And if you can, where would you put it?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Any last thoughts?
Um, no, just excited to